Hi, I'm Julia. Welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm so glad you're here today because what we're going to talk about could completely change how people understand your English. You see, a lot of learners spend hours memorizing vocabulary and studying grammar, which is great, but they forget one powerful detail that can change everything: intonation. Let me ask you something. Have you ever said a perfectly correct sentence in English and the other person just stared at you, confused? Or maybe they smiled awkwardly, nodded, and changed the subject? You go back and think, wait, I said everything right. Why didn't they understand me? Well, that little mystery might have everything to do with your intonation, the rise and fall of your voice when you speak. Most English learners don't realize this right away, and honestly, it's not your fault. Many language courses and even advanced grammar books don't talk much about it. But intonation is one of the key ingredients in making your English sound clear, friendly, confident, or confusing, robotic, even rude, without you meaning to. The great news is, once you start paying attention to it and practicing a little each day, your communication improves fast. Today I want to help you hear and feel the difference. This is not about sounding native or perfect. We don't care about perfection here. This is about being understood and connecting with people. Because no matter where you are in the world, if you're learning English, your goal is probably to communicate better, not just to pass a test. Let me tell you a quick story. Last year, I met a woman named Fatima. She was from Istanbul and had been working in an international company for years. She had a great vocabulary, strong grammar, and was confident in meetings. But one day during a video call, she said to a colleague, "I didn't say you stole the files." Her colleague suddenly looked very uncomfortable. She didn't understand what had gone wrong. Later, in a private message, the colleague said, "I felt like you were accusing me." But Fatima hadn't meant that at all. She was trying to clarify a situation. What caused the misunderstanding? You guessed it. Her intonation. She had said the words correctly, but her voice stayed completely flat. It didn't show any emotion, emphasis, or reassurance. So instead of sounding calm and clarifying, she sounded cold and accusatory. It was a tough moment for her, but it was also an important lesson. Once she learned how to use intonation to reflect her meaning, her communication became much smoother, and her relationships at work improved too. This story isn't rare. I've heard so many similar experiences from learners in different parts of the world. And the reason is simple. Intonation isn't natural in English for many learners because it works very differently in other languages. Some languages use a flatter tone, some rely more on volume, and some don't change pitch as often as English does. That's why if you learned English through reading or writing, without much listening practice, your speech might sound too flat or confusing, even if the words are right. So let me break it down a little. In English, we use intonation to show emotion, attitude, certainty, surprise, politeness, and more. For example, imagine saying the sentence, "Are you okay?" Now, if I say it with a rising tone, "Are you okay?" It sounds like a real question. I'm checking on you. But if I say it with a falling tone, "Are you okay?" It sounds like I'm doubtful, maybe even annoyed. The words are the same. The meaning is completely different. That's the power of intonation. Here's another example. I didn't say he stole the book. You can stress different words in that sentence, and each time, the meaning changes. If I stress I, it sounds like I'm correcting someone. I didn't say he stole the book. Maybe someone else said it, but not me. If I stress he, it sounds like I'm blaming someone else. I didn't say he stole the book. If I stress stole, I might be suggesting he borrowed it, not stole it. The possibilities go on. This is what we call contrastive stress, and it's part of intonation too. I want you to know something important here. Mastering intonation is not about acting or being dramatic. It's about making your speech more natural and easier to understand. If people often ask you to repeat yourself, or if they misunderstand your tone, you probably don't need more vocabulary. You probably just need to adjust how your voice moves. Here's a little trick to start becoming aware of your own intonation. Record yourself speaking. I know it might feel weird at first, but trust me, it helps. Record yourself reading a few sentences out loud. Then listen to the way native speakers say the same thing, maybe from a podcast or a short video, and compare. You'll start to notice the differences in pitch, speed, and rhythm. Another great way to practice is through a method called shadowing. You listen to a short sentence or phrase from a native speaker and immediately repeat it, trying to match the voice, tone, and emotion. Do it with movie clips, interviews, or even cartoons, whatever you enjoy. It's one of the most effective and fun ways to train your intonation naturally. I also encourage you to listen actively when watching shows, listening to podcasts, or having conversations. Don't just listen for the words, listen for how they're said. Does the speaker's voice go up or down? Do they sound curious, surprised, or polite? Try to copy that musical pattern, and if you're wondering whether this really works, just think about this. When we speak our first language, we're not thinking about grammar or vocabulary. We're just expressing. That flow, that ease, a lot of it comes from rhythm and intonation. That's what makes speech natural. When you start building this into your English, everything changes. Before we move on, I want to invite you to pause and reflect for a moment. Can you remember a time when someone misunderstood your tone in English? What happened? How did it make you feel? These small moments matter because they're part of your journey to fluency. And I want you to know, you're not alone. Thousands of learners around the world are dealing with the same thing. That's why this community exists. That's why the English Talk community is here, to support you in becoming not just a better English speaker, but a better communicator. And if you're enjoying this episode so far, I'd love for you to do something small that makes a big difference. Like this episode, follow or subscribe wherever you're listening, and maybe share it with a friend who's also learning English. It helps us reach more learners just like you. And honestly, it motivates me to keep creating more episodes like this one. Let's keep going, because the way you sound when you speak English can truly change the way people connect with you. Let me take you back to a moment that really stayed with me. It was a normal Wednesday afternoon, and I was having a conversation with one of my students, Fatima, a marketing analyst based in Istanbul. She'd been working for years in an international environment, attending meetings in English, handling clients from different countries, writing reports, giving presentations, you name it. She had done everything that someone at her level in business is expected to do. She was confident, clear, professional. But on that day, something had gone wrong. She came to me looking a little puzzled. "Julia," she said, "I think I upset a client today, but I really don't know why." Naturally, I asked what had happened, and she told me. During a discussion about a shared folder that had been accidentally deleted, the client suggested that maybe someone on Fatima's team had removed the files. Fatima responded with a simple sentence. "I didn't say you stole the files." Now, if you look at those words on paper, they're completely innocent. A clear denial, a logical clarification. But here's the twist. The way Fatima said it, her tone, her delivery, made the client go silent. They suddenly looked defensive, like they had been accused of something serious. Fatima noticed the shift immediately, but didn't understand it. She replayed the sentence in her mind. "I didn't say you stole the files." It felt correct. Grammatically, it was. But emotionally, that's where the problem was hiding. So we dug a little deeper. I asked her to say the sentence to me exactly how she said it on the call. And when she did, I heard it right away. Her voice was completely flat. No rise, no fall, no stress, no warmth. Just one steady line of words. That's when it hit me. And I explained something that changed how Fatima approached English from that day on. English has a kind of music. It's not just about the words you say, but the melody you use when you say them. And that melody, intonation, is what helps people interpret your meaning, your emotions, your attitude. When Fatima said, "I didn't say you stole the files," without any variation in her pitch, it sounded cold, defensive, almost like she was accusing the client. Of course, that wasn't her intention, but the melody told a different story than the words did. I had her try it again, this time with the right tone. We practiced emphasizing different words depending on what she wanted to express. "I didn't say you stole the files," meaning maybe someone else said it. "I didn't say you stole the files," meaning maybe someone else did. "I didn't say you stole the files." Maybe she implied it, but didn't say it. We explored all the versions, and she was amazed. What surprised Fatima most was not just that intonation could change the meaning so much, but how quickly people reacted to it. She realized that, in her own language, Turkish, the pitch range in everyday speech was much narrower. Emotions were often shown with words or facial expressions, not voice movement. But in English, intonation carries a huge part of the message. It's like an emotional translator built into the language. Miss that part, and you risk being misunderstood, sometimes badly. She remembered other moments that suddenly made more sense. Times when she said something polite but people didn't respond warmly. Or when her questions were met with silence or confusion. It wasn't the grammar, it wasn't the vocabulary, it was the tone. Flat tone in English can often come across as disinterested, robotic, or even rude, especially in customer service or professional settings. That's something few language courses teach you, but it can make or break a conversation. Fatima's experience was a wake-up call, and it's not just her. I've worked with professionals from Tokyo, Warsaw, Mumbai, Paris, people who were technically brilliant, but struggled with subtle communication because their intonation didn't match their message. One client from Seoul, for example, would often say thank you at the end of meetings with a voice that dropped sharply at the end, which made him sound irritated. Another student from Madrid used a rising tone for every statement, turning her thoughts into constant-sounding questions, which made her seem unsure of everything she said, even when she was completely right. These may seem like small things, but they have a big impact on how others perceive your message. That's why I always say, intonation isn't decoration, it's communication. To help Fatima, we created a simple practice routine, nothing too complicated. Every day, she would take 5 minutes to listen to short audio clips, some from news shows, some from casual conversations, and mimic them out loud. She focused on the rise and fall of the voice, the stress, the pauses. We also recorded her reading simple sentences and then played them back so she could hear how she sounded compared to the original. This method, called shadowing, is one of the best tools for improving pronunciation and intonation because it teaches your mouth and ears to work together. Within 2 weeks, she already noticed a difference. Her colleagues responded more positively. Her emails even started to reflect her new tone. Yes, even writing improved, because she started thinking more about how her words would be heard, not just read. And the next time she had a video call, with that same client, she told me they had a smooth and relaxed conversation. No awkward silences, no confusion. Just clear, friendly communication. And that's what I want for you too. Because I know how frustrating it is when you do all the right things, study hard, memorize, practice, but still feel like people don't get you. Sometimes it feels like there's a secret code in English that no one tells you about. Well, now you know, intonation is part of that code. Once you start using it, people won't just understand your words. They'll understand you. You don't need to be a singer or an actor to use intonation. It's just about noticing the music of the language and letting your voice reflect what you mean. Whether you're giving a presentation, chatting with a friend, or just asking for directions, the rise and fall of your voice can be the difference between sounding flat or sounding fluent. So the next time you speak English, remember Fatima. Remember that moment when a simple sentence with the wrong tone created tension instead of clarity. Then take a breath and think about your melody. Start small. Practice short sentences. Listen more closely. And with time, you'll start to hear the rhythm, the flow, the emotion. You'll speak not just with words, but with feeling. Because in English, how you say something can be just as important as what you say. When most people think about speaking better English, the first thing that comes to mind is pronunciation. They want to say words clearly, hit the right syllables, and avoid sounding off. And yes, pronunciation is important. But today, I want to focus on something that often gets mixed up with pronunciation, but is actually very different. I'm talking about intonation. So, what is intonation really? I get this question all the time. Intonation is the rise and fall of your voice as you speak. It's not about how you pronounce individual words. It's about how your voice moves across the entire sentence. It's the music behind the words, the emotional signal that tells listeners how you feel, what you mean, and what kind of response you're expecting. It's one of the most powerful tools in spoken English, and yet it's often ignored in classrooms. Let me give you an example. Take the sentence, "You're coming." Now just 3 syllables, but depending on how you say it, the meaning can change completely. If your voice rises at the end, you're coming? It's a question. You're not sure if the person is coming or not. If your voice stays flat, you're coming. It might sound like you're bored or annoyed. And if your voice falls slightly, you're coming. It becomes a confident statement, even a warm invitation. The words don't change. But the intonation does, and that changes everything. This is the beauty of intonation. It adds meaning without changing vocabulary. Native speakers rely on it all the time. They use it to express emotions like surprise, sarcasm, doubt, excitement, or politeness, often without even realizing they're doing it. And when a learner speaks English without intonation, using a flat or unnatural tone, it creates a gap. The words might be correct, but the message doesn't come through clearly. And this is where miscommunication starts. One of the reasons learners confuse intonation with pronunciation is because both deal with sound. But here's how I like to separate them. Pronunciation is about the small details, the sounds of consonants and vowels, the stress in a single word, the way your mouth moves. It's local, small scale, word level. Intonation is bigger. It's sentence level. It's the overall shape and rhythm of your voice when you speak in full thoughts. Imagine your voice is like a paintbrush. Pronunciation is the way you hold the brush and the strokes you make to form each letter. Intonation is the color and flow of the entire painting. Both are important, but they do different things. Let me share a real example from a student of mine, Luca, who works in finance and lives in Milan. He once gave a short talk at an online conference. His grammar was perfect. His vocabulary was professional. His pronunciation was accurate. But something felt a bit strange to the audience. Afterwards, someone told him, "Your speech was clear, but it sounded robotic." Luca came to me confused. He said, "I didn't make any mistakes. Why did they say that?" And I explained, it wasn't about the content. It was about the delivery. His voice had almost no movement. Every sentence sounded the same. It was like reading a list. And in English, that creates a barrier. It makes the listener work harder to follow your meaning. It can even make you sound less confident or less engaged, even if you're actually very passionate about the topic. So we worked on intonation. I had Luca record himself saying the same sentences in different ways: flat, rising, falling, enthusiastic, serious, curious. And slowly, he began to hear the differences. We played short clips from TED Talks, YouTube interviews, and podcasts, and he mimicked them line by line. This practice didn't just improve his speaking. It changed how he felt when he spoke. He told me, "Now I feel like people are actually listening to me," and that made him more confident. Here's the thing. Intonation is not just about sounding better. It's about being heard, being understood, being felt. It's about connecting. When you learn how to use it, you don't just speak English, you perform it in a natural way. It gives your words life, emotion, purpose. Another student I worked with, Priya from Delhi, had a different challenge. She was incredibly expressive in her own language, but in English, she sounded flat. She knew it. She told me, "In Hindi, I feel my words. In English, I only think about grammar." And that's a really common problem. Many learners focus so much on being correct that they forget to be human. But people don't connect to perfect grammar. They connect to energy, to rhythm, to tone. With Priya, we practiced something very simple. I gave her short dialogues to read aloud, with roles. We pretended we were friends talking about weekend plans, coworkers preparing for a meeting, or travelers asking for directions. Each time we focused on one thing. How would a native speaker use their voice in this situation? Would their pitch go up to show surprise? Would they pause to show confusion? Would they stretch a word to show excitement? This was eye-opening for her. She said, "I always thought I needed more vocabulary to sound natural, but I just needed to sound more alive." And that's exactly what intonation helps you do. One of the reasons this is so hard for many learners is that intonation patterns in English are not always intuitive. In some languages, tone isn't used in the same way. Or in tonal languages like Mandarin, tone can even change the meaning of a word, so learners might avoid playing with their pitch out of fear of making mistakes. But English is different. In English, tone doesn't change the word, it changes the feeling. So here's something to keep in mind. You already have the tool. You already use intonation in your first language every day. When you're happy, annoyed, excited, disappointed, you use your voice to show it. All you need to do is start noticing how that works in English and begin copying what you hear. Try this. Watch a short video in English with subtitles. Listen to how the speaker's voice moves. Don't just focus on the words. Focus on the rise and fall, on the emotion behind the year's line. Then repeat the sentence out loud, matching the same melody. Do it a few times. Record yourself if you can. You'll begin to hear the difference. And once you hear it, you can start using it. Intonation is one of those things that makes you go, oh, now it makes sense, once you start paying attention. It's invisible, but powerful. It's what turns plain speech into real conversation. It's what makes a question sound curious instead of rude, or a compliment sound warm instead of cold. And once you understand it, everything about your English begins to feel more real, more human, and more natural. One thing that can truly transform the way you speak English is understanding sentence stress. It's something many learners don't even realize they're missing, but once you get it, everything starts to feel more natural. When I say sentence stress, I'm talking about how native speakers naturally highlight certain words while almost swallowing others. It's not random, there's a pattern. And if you want to sound fluent, not just accurate, this is something you really want to pay attention to. So here's the basic idea. Not every word in a sentence gets the same level of attention. Think about that for a second. A sentence isn't just a string of words all said at the same volume and pitch. In English, we tend to stress content words. These are the words that carry the meaning. Nouns, main verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and then we let the grammar words, like articles, auxiliary verbs, prepositions, fade into the background. They're still there, but they don't get the spotlight. Let me show you what I mean with a simple sentence. She is going to the store. Now, if you say every word with equal weight, she is going to the store, it sounds robotic. It's technically correct, but it doesn't sound natural. Now listen to this. She's going to the store. The stress naturally falls on going and store because those are the content words. The other words, she's, to, and the just help with grammar, but they don't carry the main message. This pattern gives English its rhythm. It's almost like music, and when you understand the beat, your speech flows better. Think of sentence stress as the heartbeat of your sentence. Without it, English feels flat, stiff, and lifeless. With it, your words come alive. You can be more expressive, more dynamic, and more understandable. And the best part? You already know how to do this in your own language. The trick is to transfer that instinct into English by learning the patterns. I remember working with Thomas, a software developer from Warsaw. He had a strong vocabulary and understood everything in meetings, but he always felt people didn't quite catch what he was saying. I asked him to read some common phrases out loud. One of them was, I need to finish this report. He read it like this, I need to finish this report. All the words were equally loud and evenly spaced. That's when I knew we had to work on stress. We broke the sentence down. I asked him, what are the most important words here? He said, need, finish, report. Exactly. Those are the content words. So I had him say just those first, need, finish, report. Then we added the grammar words in softly. I need to finish this report. Suddenly, his speech sounded more natural, more confident. He was amazed by the difference. It wasn't about changing the words. It was about changing the rhythm. Here's something else that's interesting. Sentence stress also helps listeners understand you faster. When native speakers listen, they don't catch every single word. They catch the main ones, the stressed words, and their brains fill in the rest. So if you stress the wrong words, or if you stress every word equally, the listener has to work harder. That can lead to confusion, even if your grammar is perfect. Let's try a little practice together. Think about the phrase, I have to go, now. Which words carry meaning? Have, go, and now. These are your content words, so you want to stress them slightly more than the others. It should sound like this. I have to go now. Try saying it out loud. Now try saying it with even stress on every word. I have to go now. Hear the difference? The first version sounds natural and smooth. The second one feels robotic and unnatural. Another useful example. They were waiting for the bus. Say it slowly. Which words matter most? Waiting and bus. The rest are grammar glue. So the natural stress would be, they were waiting for the bus. If you stress they and for, it sounds strange. If you stress waiting and bus, it sounds fluent. Let's go a little deeper. Stress can also change the meaning of a sentence. Imagine this sentence. I didn't say he stole the money. Now, depending on which word you stress, the meaning changes. Stress I and it implies someone else said it. I didn't say he stole the money. Stress say and it suggests maybe you wrote it down but didn't say it. I didn't. Say he stole the money. Stress he and you suggest someone else might have done it. I didn't say he stole the money. All of these changes are based on stress alone. The words don't change, but the meaning shifts entirely. That's how powerful sentence stress is. I once worked with Natsuki, a designer from Tokyo. She was preparing for a presentation at an international conference. She was worried because every time she practiced, her English sounded stiff. Her slides were great. Her ideas were clear, but something felt off. We looked at her script, and I had her underline all the content words, nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Then we read it together, focusing only on stressing those words. After just a few tries, she said, "It finally sounds like me." That's when I knew we had unlocked something. You don't need to learn new vocabulary or master complex grammar to improve your speech. You just need to notice which words deserve the spotlight, and you don't have to stress them a lot, just enough to create a natural rhythm. Think of it as singing a simple melody. Some notes are higher, some are lower, some are quiet, some are strong. That variety is what makes it beautiful. One exercise I recommend is shadowing. Find a short clip of a native speaker, maybe from a podcast, movie, or interview, and repeat what they say, exactly as they say it. Focus on the stress. Where does their voice get louder? Where does it drop? Which words do they stretch slightly? Try to copy that, not just the words, but the music of their voice. Do this regularly and your own rhythm will start to shift. Sentence stress also helps with listening. Once you understand which words are likely to be stressed, you can start listening for just those in fast conversations. You'll notice how people often reduce or almost skip the grammar words, like is, to, the, and. They might say gonna instead of going to, or wanna instead of want to. These reductions are easier to follow when you know where the stress falls. I'll say it again because it matters. Not every word deserves equal attention. Let the important words shine. Let the others support them. This small shift changes everything. It makes you sound more like a native speaker, yes. But more importantly, it makes you easier to understand and more enjoyable to listen to. That's what fluency is really about: connection, rhythm, and clarity. I want to tell you about someone who, on paper, sounded like he had everything under control with his English. His grammar was solid, his vocabulary was broad, and he didn't make the kind of mistakes you'd expect from someone still learning the language. But he had a problem that he didn't even know was affecting him until others started responding, in a way he didn't expect. His name is Liam, and he's a game designer from Dublin. Now, if you've ever worked in the creative industry, you know that communication is a huge part of the job. It's not just about what you're building or designing, it's also about how you present your ideas, how you collaborate with others, and how you make people feel about your work. Liam is a brilliant thinker, and his games are some of the most immersive I've seen. But when he talked, something was missing. Not in the words, but in the way he said them. He once told me, "I think people assume I'm bored all the time, but I'm actually very excited about what I do." That's when I asked him to record himself speaking about one of his favorite projects. He did, and when we listened to it together, I immediately understood why his message wasn't landing the way he wanted. His tone was completely flat. Every sentence had the same pitch. There was no variation, no rise or fall, no emphasis. It sounded almost like a robot reading from a script. This is what I call the flat tone problem, and Liam was deep in it. When we speak with a flat tone, even if our message is positive or enthusiastic, it doesn't come across that way. People interpret our tone before they fully process our words. So if your voice sounds bored, uninterested, or detached, even if your message is the opposite, your listener is more likely to believe your tone than your words. For Liam, this meant that in meetings, when he was genuinely excited about a new character design or a breakthrough in his development process, others around the table thought he didn't really care. They nodded politely, gave minimal responses, and then moved on. It wasn't that they didn't like his ideas. They just didn't feel his passion. That's what intonation does. It communicates feeling. Without it, your message loses energy. We started working together to explore what his voice could actually do. I had him read out loud some basic English questions like, "Are you coming?" or "Did you see that?" These seem simple, but they require a natural rise in intonation to sound like real questions. Liam's first attempts were completely flat. He read them more like statements than questions. So we broke it down. I explained to him that in English, yes-no questions typically rise at the end. If you say, "Are you coming?" with a flat tone, it doesn't really sound like a question. It sounds like you already know the answer. But if you let your voice rise on the word coming, then it sounds open, curious, and inviting. We practiced this over and over until it felt more natural to him. Then we looked at statements. For example, take the sentence, "I really liked the story." If you say this in a flat tone, it's hard for the listener to know how you actually felt. But if you let your pitch rise slightly on really and fall at the end, on story, the sentence suddenly sounds warm and sincere. It's such a subtle thing, but it makes a huge difference in how people perceive your emotion. After a few sessions, we moved to real-world practice. Liam started using these patterns in his meetings. At first, it felt a bit exaggerated to him. He said, "I feel like I'm acting or being overly dramatic." But that's a common reaction. When you're not used to varying your pitch, even a little bit of change can feel like a lot. But what matters is how it sounds to others, not just how it feels to you. We even looked at how he handled feedback and questions in meetings. I asked him to practice responses like, "That's a great question," or "I'll look into that." These are phrases that, when said with interest and warmth, invite connection. But when said with a flat tone, they feel like you're brushing someone off. He learned to raise his voice slightly on "great" or "that," then bring it down, naturally making it sound more thoughtful and involved. Over the next few weeks, he began noticing something surprising. People were responding to him differently. They asked more follow-up questions, smiled more during his presentations, and even complimented his communication style. One of his colleagues told him, "You seem a lot more excited about things lately." But nothing had changed in his level of enthusiasm. He had just learned to show it with his voice. This is the real power of intonation. It's not just about asking questions the right way or avoiding misunderstandings. It's about connection. When your voice rises and falls in a natural, engaging rhythm, people pay attention. They feel something. They believe not only what you say, but how you feel about it. And you don't have to fake it. That's what I always tell my learners. You're not trying to become a different person. You're just learning to reflect your true energy, interest, and emotions through your speech. Liam didn't become someone else. He just uncovered a layer of communication he hadn't accessed before. I also encouraged him to listen more actively. Listening to how native speakers use their voices is one of the best ways to start internalizing these patterns. He started watching interviews with game developers, panel discussions at gaming conventions, and even short YouTube videos where creators talk about their work. Instead of focusing on the words, he paid attention to how they were saying things. Where did their voices rise? When did they pause? How did their tone shift when they moved from a technical explanation to an emotional one? It wasn't long before Liam started recording himself during meetings to self-check. He would play back his own speech and analyze it, just like we did in our first session. He noticed where he fell back into a flat tone and made notes on where he could bring more variety. The change wasn't overnight, but it was consistent, and that's what matters. It's such a common challenge, especially for learners who are more focused on vocabulary and grammar. But once you tune into intonation and start experimenting with it, your spoken English comes to life. You go from being just understood to being felt. And that's when real communication happens. Let's dive into one of the most practical and easy-to-apply patterns in English pronunciation: rising intonation for yes/no questions. This one pattern can make a dramatic difference in how natural and clear you sound when you speak. And the best part is that it's not complicated. You don't need to memorize grammar rules. You just need to listen, repeat, and start feeling how your voice can rise at the right moments. So what exactly is rising intonation? It's when your voice goes up at the end of a sentence, especially a question. In English, this is a common pattern for questions that can be answered with yes or no. Think about it this way. When you're unsure or genuinely asking for information, your voice naturally lifts at the end. That rising tone shows curiosity, interest, or the need for confirmation. Let me give you a clear example. Say the sentence, "Are you coming?" If you raise your voice at the end of coming, it's clearly a question. It shows you don't know the answer and you're asking for one. But now imagine saying the exact same words. "Are you coming?" with a falling tone. Suddenly, it sounds less like a question and more like a command or even sarcasm. That change in pitch makes all the difference. I once worked with a student named Minho from Seoul. He was doing a lot of customer service calls for an international tech company, and he was technically asking all the right questions. But clients often seemed confused or even annoyed. When we looked at a few of his call recordings, I immediately noticed the issue. His voice stayed flat or even dipped at the end of yes/no questions. So when he said things like, "Would you like to reset your password?" it sounded more like a statement than a question. People didn't always realize he was giving them a choice. When he started practicing rising intonation, everything changed. That same sentence, "Would you like to reset your password?" became clear and helpful. The client could hear the question and knew they had an option. This tiny adjustment made his calls smoother and customers became more responsive. He told me later, "I didn't realize how much intonation could change the whole mood of a sentence." Now, let's try practicing a few examples together. You don't have to repeat after me out loud if you're in a public place, but try to say them quietly or even just notice the movement of your voice in your mind. Ready? Try this one. "Do you like coffee?" Your voice should rise gently at the end, especially on the word coffee. Not too dramatic, just a light lift. Now try saying it again, but with a falling tone. "Do you like coffee?" See the difference? The second version doesn't feel like a question. It sounds like you already know the answer. Or maybe you're just stating a fact. But the first version feels curious, open, and friendly. Let's try another one. "Are you finished?" With rising intonation, this feels polite and neutral. You're simply asking. But if you say, "Are you finished?" with a falling tone, it might come across as impatient, or like you're expecting them to be done already. That's not the message you want to send, especially in professional or polite situations. Here's another. "Did you call him?" Rising intonation here shows interest. You want to know if the action happened. Now try saying it as a statement. "Did you call him?" It doesn't feel like a question anymore. It feels more like you're assuming they did and maybe even questioning why they did. That slight tone change can cause confusion or send the wrong message. When I work with learners, I often tell them to imagine drawing a small hill with their voice at the end of the question. That's how I explain rising intonation. You go up, not too sharply, just enough to signal that the sentence is open, that you're waiting for a reply. And the beauty of this pattern is that once you start using it regularly, your questions sound much more natural, and people immediately understand that you're asking, not stating. Let me share another story. I once coached Amara, a nurse from Nairobi, who was preparing for a medical interview in English. She was well prepared in terms of content. Her answers were clear, her grammar was solid, but her yes/no questions during the role-play part of the interview felt off. For example, she would ask, "Is this your first time here?" with a flat or falling tone. It didn't sound like a question, So the interviewer would sometimes pause, unsure if she was making a comment or actually asking something. We practiced with just 5 or 6 standard medical intake questions, all using rising intonation. Are you allergic to any medication? Do you have a history of asthma? Is there anyone here with you today? As soon as she added the rising tone at the end, her speech became warmer, more professional, and more understandable. She later said that small change helped her feel more confident, like her tone finally matched her intention. This is the thing. People want to understand you, but your intonation gives them clues even before they finish processing your words. When you use the wrong intonation pattern, they might get the wrong message. But when your tone rises naturally, at the end of a yes/no question, it signals that you are inviting them to respond. Let's try a few more examples you might use in daily life. Are you hungry? Light rise at the end. Did you get my email? Go up on email. Can we start now? Again, rise at the end. All of these are yes/no questions. Without the rising tone, they could easily sound like assumptions or even small commands. But when you raise your voice just slightly at the end, they become clear, polite questions. Now, I know some of you might be wondering if you have to exaggerate the rise, and the answer is no. You're not trying to sound overly dramatic. You just want to signal the question naturally. Think about how a native speaker sounds when they're asking a casual question. It's a soft, natural rise, not a sharp one. That's the balance you want to find. I recommend you record yourself asking simple yes/no questions, just like we've practiced. Play them back and ask yourself, does this sound like a question? If it doesn't, adjust your tone and try again. You'll be surprised how quickly your ear and your voice start working together once you become aware of this pattern. Also, watch how native speakers use rising intonation in different situations. You'll hear it in movies, podcasts, interviews, and even casual YouTube videos. Don't just listen to the words. Focus on the music of the sentence. That's where the real meaning often lives. Rising intonation for yes/no questions is one of the simplest changes you can make to sound more natural in English. Once you get comfortable with it, your communication becomes clearer and more effective, and people feel more connected to what you're saying. Let's shift our attention to another important piece of the intonation puzzle, falling intonation. While rising intonation is often used for yes/no questions, falling intonation is what we use for most statements and wei-chao questions. That includes sentences like, I live in Tokyo, or where are you from? It might seem like a small detail, but getting this right can change how confident, clear, and natural you sound when you speak English. So what exactly is falling intonation? It's when your voice starts slightly higher and then drops at the end of the sentence. It's not about volume, it's about pitch. That drop signals to the listener that your thought is complete. You're not waiting for an answer. You're not suggesting something might change. You're giving information or asking for specific details. It's one of the most common patterns in English, and when you start using it intentionally, you'll notice how people react differently to what you say. Let's start with simple statements. Imagine I say, I'm from Brazil. If I let my voice fall on the word Brazil, the listener understands that I'm done. I've made a statement. There's no question in the air. But if I use a rising intonation, I'm from Brazil, it sounds like I'm unsure. Maybe I don't know where I'm from, or maybe I'm asking if that's okay. You see how that subtle shift creates confusion? The listener starts wondering, why is she unsure about that? All because the intonation didn't match the message. That's why falling intonation is so important when you're giving facts, sharing opinions, or making any kind of statement. It communicates certainty. It tells the listener, this is what I mean. I'm not asking, I'm telling. And that confidence, even in everyday sentences, builds trust. Whether you're in a job interview, meeting new people, or giving a presentation, falling intonation makes your message sound solid and complete. Now let's talk about why questions. These are the questions that begin with words like who, what, where, when, why, and how. Unlike yes, no questions, which rise at the end, what questions usually fall. For example, what do you do? That last word, do, should go down in pitch. It might feel counterintuitive at first, Many learners raise their voice at the end of all questions because in their native language, that's the rule. But in English, rising intonation at the end of a which question can make it sound like you're unsure if it's even a question. Or worse, it can sound unnatural or even awkward. I remember working with Carlos, an engineer from Buenos Aires. He was preparing for a conference where he had to moderate a Q&A session in English. He had prepared his questions carefully, but something felt off when he practiced. Every time he asked a why question, he used rising intonation. Where do you work? With a rising pitch on work made the question sound less confident, almost hesitant. We practiced those same questions using a falling tone, just by dropping his voice slightly at the end. Where do you work? The questions immediately sounded more natural, clear, and professional. Let's try a few more together. Listen to the difference. What's your name? With falling intonation sounds direct, confident, and neutral. Now say it with rising intonation. What's your name? It sounds like you're unsure, or like maybe you're surprised or even confused. That might be fine in some situations, but it's not how a native speaker would usually ask that question. Another one. How did you hear about us? This is a common question in interviews or customer service. Use a falling tone on us. That drop in pitch makes the sentence feel finished and clear. If you say, how did you hear about us? With a rise at the end, it adds a layer of doubt, like you're unsure you want to know or expect the other person to answer. When you use falling intonation correctly, you don't just sound more natural, you also make it easier for others to follow you. Imagine listening to someone who ends every sentence with a rising tone. It feels like every sentence is incomplete, like they're not sure about what they're saying. That creates tension for the listener. Your brain keeps waiting for the end that never comes. Falling intonation, on the other hand, gives people the sense that you're in control of your thoughts, that you mean what you say, and that you've said it completely. Even in storytelling, this is important. When you tell a story and you use falling intonation at the right moments, you help your listener know when a thought ends and a new one begins. It creates structure in your speech. Let's take a simple example. I woke up early this morning. Falling intonation at the end shows the idea is complete. I made a cup of coffee. Another fall. Then I went for a walk in the park. Again, a fall. That pattern helps your listener stay with you. Now imagine telling the same story, but with a rise at the end of each sentence. It would sound like this. I woke up early this morning. I made a cup of coffee. Then I went for a walk. In the park? It starts to feel like you're unsure if any of that really happened. And it makes it harder for the listener to follow your story. Let me give you another real example. Yuki, a business student from Osaka, once told me that she felt nervous giving presentations in class because people didn't seem to take her seriously. She thought it was her vocabulary or her grammar. But when I listened to one of her recordings, I realized the problem was in her intonation. She ended nearly every sentence with a rising tone. It gave the impression that she was asking permission to speak, rather than stating her ideas. Once we shifted her tone to fall at the end of each main sentence, everything changed. Her classmates started nodding during her presentation. Her professors gave her better feedback. Her words hadn't changed, but her intonation had. So how? Can you start practicing falling intonation? One simple technique is to record yourself saying a few why questions and common statements. Pay attention to the last word. Does your voice go up or down? If it goes up, try repeating it with a gentle drop at the end. Not too sharp, just enough to signal finality. You can also listen closely to native speakers. Watch interviews, news, anchors, or even scripted shows. Notice how they end their sentences when giving information. They almost always let their voice fall at the end of a complete idea. Start mimicking that. Don't just copy the words, copy the music of the sentence. Here are a few practice lines you can try right now. I live in Madrid. Let your voice fall on Madrid. She's an architect. Fall on architect. When did you arrive? Fall on arrive. Why are you here? Fall on here. The more you do this, the more natural it will feel. At first, you might have to think about it. That's totally normal. But over time, your brain will start to recognize the pattern, and it will become part of your natural rhythm when you speak. Falling intonation is one of those tools that isn't always obvious, but it works behind the scenes to build trust, clarity, and fluency. It tells people, I know what I'm saying, and I mean it. It's not about sounding robotic or overly formal. It's about giving your listener a clear signal that your thought is complete. When your tone matches your intention, communication becomes smoother, and people feel more at ease talking with you. Elena from Madrid was one of my most dedicated students. She worked hard, practiced every day, and had a really good grasp of grammar and vocabulary. But one day she came to me after a class and said, Julia, I think I sound rude in English. I don't mean to, but people look surprised when I ask for things. I knew exactly what she meant. Elena was kind and respectful in Spanish, and she tried to be the same in English. But something about her tone didn't translate. It wasn't her words. It was the music of her voice. You see, in English, politeness isn't just about saying please or using the right vocabulary. It's also about how your voice sounds when you speak. If you ask for something in a flat or too direct tone, it can come across as demanding, even if that's not your intention at all. Elena would say things like, give me a pen, or move your bag, and even though she wasn't trying to be rude, the tone made it sound like a command. Her voice didn't rise or soften at the end. There was no melody to show kindness or consideration. So we started working on something called rise-fall intonation, especially in polite requests. This is when your voice rises gently and then falls at the end of a sentence. It creates a softer, more inviting tone. I also introduced her to modal verbs like could, would, and may. These words act like cushions in a sentence. They soften the message and add a layer of respect or possibility. For example, instead of saying, give me a pen, she practiced saying, could I borrow your pen? And instead of move your bag, she learned to say, would you mind moving your bag, please? Just that change in structure made a huge difference. But even more important was how she said it. We recorded her voice before and after the changes. In the first recordings, her sentences were short and flat. There was no rise, no pause, no softness. In the new recordings, her voice had movement. She added a small rise in the middle of the request, then let it fall gently at the end. That rise-fall pattern made her sound warm, thoughtful, and respectful. Her classmates started reacting differently right away. People smiled more when she asked questions. They responded faster when she needed help. It was like a secret code had been unlocked, just by shifting her tone and word choice. Politeness in English often lives in the combination of grammar and intonation. You might have the right words, but if your voice sounds too sharp, people might misinterpret you. And that's especially true in cultures where indirectness is a sign of respect. In English-speaking environments, people often expect a certain level of subtlety in requests and opinions. If you say, I want water, it sounds strong, even a little cold. But if you say, could I have some water, please? With a gentle rise and fall, it sounds polite and considerate. Elena also had trouble with how she responded to others. When someone asked her a favor, she would sometimes say no directly, which is normal in Spanish. But in English, a direct no can feel harsh. We practiced alternatives like, I'm really sorry, but I can't, or I'd love to help, but I'm busy right now. She didn't need to change who she was, just adjust her rhythm and tone. It gave her more control over how people perceived her. One moment that stood out was during a group project. A teammate asked Elena, could you send me the report by tonight? Before she might have said, no, I can't. This time she said, I'm afraid I won't be able to finish it tonight, but I'll send it first thing in the morning. And she said it with a soft, polite intonation. Her voice rose slightly on I'm afraid, and then fell gently at the end. The classmate nodded and smiled. There was no tension, no awkwardness, just understanding. Sometimes intonation also works with facial expression and body language, but for language learners who focus mostly on speech, the tone of voice becomes even more important. Elena started practicing in front of a mirror. She would say, would you help me with this? And watch her expression. Then she'd listen to her recordings. She wasn't just practicing English anymore. She was practicing social interaction, and it made her feel more confident in every part of her daily life. This idea of softening speech with intonation and modals is powerful because it goes beyond grammar. It touches the emotional part of communication. Think about the difference between come here and could you come here for a second? The first feels urgent or even aggressive. The second feels kind, cooperative. And if you say it with a gentle rise-fall tone, it becomes almost impossible to say no to. That's the power of this pattern. One technique that helped Elena a lot was repeating model sentences. She would listen to native speakers on YouTube, in podcasts, or in movies, and repeat what they said, matching not just the words but also the music of their sentences. She especially loved romantic comedies because characters often use soft, polite tones in conversation. She'd pause the movie, mimic the tone, and record herself. Over time, her speech became more melodic, more expressive, and more natural. If you're wondering how to start doing the same, try taking simple phrases and changing both the structure and the tone. For example, instead of saying, "Tell me the answer," try, "Could you tell me the answer, please?" Let your voice rise slightly on "could you" and then fall gently on "please." Or instead of "close the window," try, "Would you mind closing the window?" Again, the soft rise at the start and the fall at the end create a feeling of ease. Elena told me that learning this pattern changed how she felt, not just how she sounded. She said she used to worry about being misunderstood, and now she felt in control. People reacted to her differently, not because she changed her personality, but because she learned how to shape her sentences with intention. She wasn't just speaking English. She was communicating. In fact, one day she said something I'll never forget. "I used to think being polite in English meant being quiet or passive. Now I realize it means using my voice in the right way." That's such a beautiful way to describe it. Being polite doesn't mean disappearing. It means being present with kindness and clarity. So much of what we say is about how we say it. The right words help, but tone carries your emotion, your attitude, your intention. Elena discovered that, and once she did, everything changed, from how her professors responded to how confident she felt asking a stranger for directions on a trip to Canada. It wasn't magic, it was just rhythm, melody, and a little awareness. One of the most fascinating parts of English, and one that often surprises learners, is how much meaning we pack into something as small as the end of a sentence. Tag questions are a perfect example. These little phrases like "aren't you" or "isn't it" may look simple on paper, but the way you say them, especially the intonation you use, can completely change how your message is received. It's one of those subtle tools that can make you sound natural and confident, or hesitant and unsure, depending on what you want to express. Let's look at a basic example. If I say, "You're coming, aren't you?" with a rising intonation at the end, what I'm really doing is checking. My voice goes up on "aren't you?" and that rising tone signals that I'm uncertain, maybe even a little nervous. I want to confirm something that I'm not totally sure about. But if I say the exact same sentence, "You're coming, aren't you?" with a falling tone at the end, it changes completely. Now it sounds like I'm confident that you're coming. I'm just using the tag to keep the conversation friendly or invite agreement. The words didn't change, but the meaning shifted. That's the power of intonation. I've met many learners who use tag questions, but don't think much about how their voice moves. They memorize the grammar, positive statement with negative tag, or negative statement with positive tag, but they don't realize how important the melody is. Without the right intonation, your sentence might send the wrong message. A rising tag can make you sound uncertain even if you're trying to sound sure. A falling tag can make you sound firm, or even pushy, when you're actually just asking. This came up with one of my students, Anil, who works as a team lead in a multinational company. He used tag questions all the time, which was great. It showed his level was quite advanced, but something was off. His colleagues often looked confused when he spoke. He would say things like, "You finished the task, didn't you?" with a strong rising tone at the end. That tone made it sound like he wasn't sure, like he was questioning the other person's reliability. But what he really wanted to say was, "I believe you finished the task. I'm just confirming in a friendly way." When he switched to a falling intonation, his colleagues responded with more ease. They stopped feeling like they were being interrogated, and started reacting with confidence. That's when I realized how much tag questions are about relationship, not just grammar. When you use rising intonation, you open a door. You invite the other person to fill in the gap. You say, "I'm not totally sure. Please tell me." When you use falling intonation, you close the door just slightly. You're still inviting the other person to respond, but from a place of shared understanding. You're showing that you already expect agreement. And that changes the whole feeling of the conversation. Let's take a few more examples to really feel the difference. If I say, "It's cold today, isn't it?" With rising intonation, it feels like I'm checking. Maybe I'm not sure if you feel the same way. But with a falling tone, "It's cold today, isn't it?" I sound more certain. I'm expecting you to agree with me. I'm probably just making a comment and moving the conversation forward. It's these little details that help your English sound more fluent and more emotionally accurate. We also use tag questions to manage politeness and tone. Sometimes, when we want to be friendly but not too direct, we use a rising intonation to soften a request. Imagine you're at a cafe and you want to sit at a table that someone is cleaning. You might say, "You're done cleaning here, aren't you?" If you rise at the end, it sounds like a polite check. If you fall at the end, it could sound a bit aggressive, like you're assuming they should be done already. So choosing the right intonation helps you manage social situations more smoothly. It's not just about being correct, it's about being appropriate. That's something many learners miss. They focus on grammar accuracy, which is great, but they forget about tone accuracy. And that's where intonation makes a real difference. Native speakers are constantly interpreting your attitude from your tone. They might not even notice it consciously, but they feel it. They feel whether you're confident, uncertain, friendly, annoyed, or curious, all from the way your voice rises or falls. I recommend practicing tag questions with both tones so you can hear and feel the difference. Try saying, "You're from Brazil, aren't you?" First with a rising tone, then with a falling tone. Notice how your intention changes. With a rise, you're genuinely asking. With a fall, you're just confirming what you already believe. Then try it with different contexts. Questions about work, about plans, about feelings. For example, "You're happy with the result, aren't you?" Try saying that with both tones and imagine how the other person might react. Another trick I use with students is what I call the mirror echo. You say the sentence in the mirror, then echo it back with the opposite tone. This helps you get control over your intonation patterns and use them intentionally. Start slow. Focus on how your voice feels when it rises and when it falls. With time, your brain starts to associate those patterns with different emotions and social meanings. One thing that really helps is listening closely to native speakers. Watch interviews, sitcoms, or news segments and pay attention to tag questions. How does the speaker's voice move? Are they inviting a response or confirming a fact? Are they expressing doubt or simply connecting? The more you listen actively, the more you'll internalize these patterns without needing to think about them too much. It's interesting how something so small can be so revealing. That tiny phrase at the end of a sentence can show your attitude, your certainty, your relationship to the listener. It's like the emotional punctuation of English. If you master this, you're not just speaking English, you're speaking it with awareness and confidence. A lot of people ask me, "Julia, what if I mess it up? What if I use the wrong tone?" And I always say, that's okay. What matters is that you start noticing and practicing. Even native speakers sometimes shift their tone by mistake or on purpose, depending on context. What sets fluent speakers apart is their ability to use tone as a tool to show friendliness, confidence, or curiosity, not just to deliver information. Intonation. In tag questions might seem like a detail, but it's one of those details that makes all the difference. You can learn it, you can practice it, and with time, it will become natural. You won't need to think about whether your tone is rising or falling. You'll feel it, and your listeners will too. Shadowing is one of those powerful techniques that can completely change the way you speak English, especially when it comes to intonation and natural rhythm. If you've never tried shadowing before, you might wonder what it actually means and why it works so well. Basically, shadowing means you listen to a sentence or phrase and immediately repeat it aloud, trying to copy everything about the speaker's voice, the way they stress words, how their voice rises and falls, the speed of their speech, and even the pauses they take. It's like being a shadow of the speaker, following their voice as closely as possible. When I first learned about shadowing, I was skeptical. I thought, how can simply repeating sentences help me sound more natural or improve my pronunciation? But after trying it myself, I quickly saw the benefits. This technique forces you to listen carefully and really tune into the music of English, the melody, the rhythm, the flow. It's not just about pronouncing individual words correctly, it's about how those words connect together in real speech. Intonation is often invisible when you read on paper, but with shadowing, you train your ear to notice it, and your mouth to produce it almost automatically. Let me tell you a little story about one of my students, May, who lives in Shanghai. May was very good at vocabulary and grammar, but she struggled to sound natural when she spoke. Her intonation was very flat, and people often asked her to repeat things. I suggested she try shadowing. At first, she started with very short clips from movies and podcasts, just a few seconds at a time. She'd listen, then immediately repeat, matching the speaker's voice as closely as she could. It was challenging at first, but after a few weeks, she noticed a big difference. Not only did her pronunciation improve, but her confidence grew too because she sounded more like a native speaker. Shadowing also helps you practice the rhythm of English, which can be very different from other languages. English has a unique flow, with stressed and unstressed syllables creating a pattern that native speakers use naturally. When you shadow, you learn this rhythm without having to study complicated rules. It's almost like dancing with the language. You follow the beat and move smoothly from one word to the next. This makes your English easier to understand and more pleasant to listen to. Another great advantage of shadowing is that it improves your listening skills. You become more attuned to subtle differences in pronunciation and intonation. For example, you start to hear the difference between a question and a statement just by the tone of voice, or you notice when a speaker is excited versus when they are tired or sad. This awareness is crucial for real-life conversations, because understanding emotion and intention behind words is just as important as understanding the words themselves. Now, you might be wondering how to get started with shadowing. It's really simple and you don't need anything fancy. Choose a short audio clip. This could be from a podcast episode, a movie scene, a news report, or even a YouTube video. It's best if the clip is something interesting or fun because you'll want to keep practicing. Listen carefully to the speaker, then immediately repeat what they said, trying to match their voice as closely as possible. Don't worry if you don't get it right the first time. Keep practicing, and soon you'll find that your voice naturally follows the patterns you hear. Here's a quick practice example for us to try together. Imagine I say, "Are you coming to the party tonight?" Your job is to listen and then repeat with the same rise and fall in my voice. Notice how the voice rises at the end because it's a yes/no question. Now try this one. "I'm really excited about the weekend." This sentence has a falling intonation because it's a statement. Repeat after me, paying attention to how your voice moves down at the end. Practicing like this helps you build muscle memory in your mouth and ears, so eventually it becomes second nature. Shadowing is also flexible. You can do it anywhere and anytime, while commuting, walking, or even during breaks. Many learners I work with use headphones and play short clips on their phones. They repeat out loud even when they are alone, building confidence in their voice. The key is to keep the practice consistent. Just a few minutes. Every day can make a huge difference over time. It's important to choose the right materials for shadowing. At first, you don't want something too difficult because it might be frustrating or discouraging. Pick content that is clear and spoken at a normal speed, not too fast, not too slow. Later, when you feel more confident, you can challenge yourself with more complex or faster speech. This gradual increase helps you stretch your abilities without feeling overwhelmed. You can also use shadowing to improve specific parts of your English. For example, if you want to sound more polite, find clips where speakers use soft intonation and gentle phrasing. If you want to be more persuasive or expressive, look for passionate speeches or emotional dialogues. Shadowing lets you practice not just how to say words correctly, but how to say them with feeling and meaning. Finally, remember that shadowing isn't about perfection. It's about practice and progress. Your goal is to get closer to natural speech little by little, not to sound exactly like a native speaker overnight. Every time you shadow, you are training your brain and mouth to work together better. Over time, your English will sound smoother, your sentences will flow, and your intonation will reflect your true meaning. This will help you communicate more effectively and feel more confident in any English conversation. So, why not give shadowing a try today? Find a short clip you enjoy, listen closely, and repeat. Notice the rise and fall of the speaker's voice. Try to match it and keep practicing. You might be surprised how quickly your English changes. It's a simple technique with real results, and I'm excited for you to experience it. I still remember the day Ravi sent me a message after one of his customer support calls went terribly wrong. Ravi lives in Mumbai and works in a tech support center that handles international clients, mostly from English-speaking countries. He's smart, professional, and always eager to improve. But that day, he felt frustrated and confused. He told me, "I said everything correctly, Julia. I followed the script, but the client got upset." That's when I asked him to tell me exactly what he said and how he said it. Ravi explained that he was trying to reassure a client about a delay in service. He said, "We're working on it right now." On paper, that sounds perfectly polite and informative. But then he repeated the way he had said it during the call, and I immediately understood the problem. His voice had a rising intonation at the end, which made the sentence sound like a question, or worse, like he was unsure or even being sarcastic. Imagine hearing "we're working on it right now" with a rising tone, especially if you're already frustrated. No wonder the client thought he was being dismissive or unprofessional. This moment became a turning point for Ravi. He had never realized how much his intonation affected the message he was trying to send. Like many learners, he had focused on grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation, but he had overlooked intonation completely. Once we started working on this together, things began to shift. He became aware of how English speakers use tone to express certainty, politeness, emotion, and even subtle meaning. It was like discovering a hidden layer of communication he hadn't seen before. We started with simple exercises. First, I asked Ravi to listen to short customer service recordings from native English speakers. These were not fancy scripts, just ordinary interactions with a clear tone and natural rhythm. I told him to focus only on the intonation, not the words. Was the speaker rising or falling at the end of the sentence? Did their voice sound calm, firm, cheerful, or concerned? After a few sessions, Ravi started to recognize the patterns. He noticed how native speakers used falling intonation on statements to sound confident and reassuring. He also saw how rising intonation was used carefully, mainly in yes-no questions or to show uncertainty. Then we added shadowing. Ravi would play the recording and immediately repeat what the speaker said, trying to copy not just the words, but the entire melody of the sentence. At first, it was difficult. He felt awkward hearing his own voice and trying to match someone else's tone. But little by little, his confidence grew. He started recording himself and comparing it with the original, and he could hear the improvement. His sentences began to flow better. He sounded more natural, more fluent, more believable. One of the most effective things we did was take his real work scripts and rewrite them slightly to practice intonation. Instead of just saying, "We're working on it right now," we added short, natural phrases like, "No worries, we've got this under control," or "Everything's being handled as we speak." These phrases gave him a chance to use falling intonation in a relaxed, confident way. He practiced these lines every morning before his shift, repeating them out loud with different emotions: calm, helpful, cheerful, even firm when needed. After about 2 weeks, Ravi noticed something different. Clients stopped interrupting him. They responded with more patience and trust. His tone no longer sounded like a question when he was giving answers. He felt more respected on the phone, and his stress level dropped. One client even complimented him, saying, "Thanks, that was really clear." It may not sound like much, but to Ravi, that sentence meant the world. The beauty of this change wasn't just in how others reacted to him, it was also in how he felt about himself. Before, he often doubted his ability to communicate clearly in English, especially under pressure. Now he realized that small adjustments in intonation could completely shift how people perceived him. He didn't need a perfect accent or complex vocabulary. What mattered more was sounding sure, natural, and sincere. Intonation gave him the power to do that. Another key part of Ravi's progress was listening to himself. He started using voice memos on his phone to record short practice sessions. He would read a script, shadow a recording, or just speak freely about his day. Then he would listen back and ask, "Does this sound clear? Does it sound like I believe what I'm saying?" Over time, his ear became sharper. He could hear the difference between sounding robotic and sounding real. This self-awareness is a big step for anyone learning a language. I also encouraged Ravi to listen to real conversations, not just recordings made for learners, but authentic speech like interviews, podcasts, or even casual chats in movies and TV shows. He paid attention to how people express reassurance, give instructions, apologize, or ask for something. He noticed how polite intonation often includes a fall followed by a slight rise, which softens the message and sounds more friendly. For example, instead of saying, "You need to wait," which sounds flat and direct, you might hear, "You'll just need to wait a moment," with a gentle, rising tone on moment. These little shifts make a big difference. Today, Ravi still works in tech support, but with a lot more confidence. He even mentors new team members, showing them how to handle calls effectively, including tips on tone and delivery. He tells them, "You can say the exact same words 2 different ways, and one of them will make the client happy, and the other might get you in trouble." That's the kind of insight that only comes from experience and awareness. Intonation may seem like a small detail, but for Ravi, it completely changed the way he does his job and how people respond to him. I wanted to share his story because it's such a good example of how intonation isn't just about sounding nice, it's about being understood the way you intend. When your tone matches your message, you create clarity and connection. And sometimes, as Ravi learned, that can turn a difficult call into a successful one. I want to take you into one of my favorite tools for making English come alive, something that sounds technical at first, but once you understand it, it becomes incredibly natural and even a little playful. It's called contrastive stress. Now, don't let the name scare you. Contrastive stress is just the way we emphasize different words in a sentence to highlight what we really mean, what we're correcting, or what we want to clarify. It's that extra layer of meaning that tells your listener what matters most in what you're saying. Let me show you how it works with a simple sentence. I didn't say he stole the book. Try saying that out loud, just like that. Now let's play with the stress. First, put the stress on I. I didn't say he stole the book. What are you really saying now? You're probably suggesting that someone else said it, but not you. The focus has shifted from the whole sentence to who said it. Now say it again, this time with the stress on didn't. I didn't say he stole the book. You're strongly denying the accusation like, I never said that. That little shift changes the emotional weight. Next, try stressing say, I didn't say he stole the book. You're implying that maybe you communicated it in another way. Maybe you wrote it down, maybe you hinted at it, but you didn't say it. Now stress he, I didn't say he stole the book. Now it sounds like you're correcting the subject. Maybe it was someone else who stole it, not him. Then we go to stole. I didn't say he stole the book. This suggests you're correcting the action. Maybe he borrowed it, maybe he found it, but stealing? No, that wasn't the word you used. And finally, stress book. I didn't say he stole the book. So what did he steal then? A pen? A bag? You're now clarifying what object was involved. This is the power of contrastive stress. You're not changing the grammar or vocabulary. You're changing your meaning by simply highlighting a different word. Native speakers use this constantly in conversation, often without realizing it. It helps avoid misunderstandings, adds emotion or humor, and makes your speech much more dynamic. And the best part? Once you become aware of it, you can start using it right away. You don't need any advanced grammar knowledge, just awareness of what you want to emphasize. I remember helping a student named Grace who always sounded very flat when she spoke, even when she had the right words. She worked in finance and often had to explain complex information to clients. She told me, they understand my English, but they don't seem to follow what's most important. That's when we discovered the missing piece. She wasn't using stress to highlight meaning. She was giving every word the same weight. So when she explained numbers or options, Her voice didn't guide the listener. They had to figure out for themselves what to pay attention to. We started practicing by taking simple statements and changing the stress. First in short sentences, then in more complex ones. For example, with "this report is due tomorrow," she practiced stressing different words. This report is due tomorrow. Each one gave the sentence a new focus. If she stressed this, it meant not that one, but this one. If she stressed tomorrow, it meant not today or next week. The deadline was very clear. After a few sessions, she said something that really stuck with me. "It's like I finally have a highlighter in my voice." I loved that. That's exactly what contrastive stress is. It's your vocal highlighter. There's also a fun side to this. You can use contrastive stress to be sarcastic, playful, or dramatic. Think about a phrase like, "Oh, that's helpful." Depending on which word you stress, it can be sincere or completely sarcastic. "Oh, that's helpful" might be genuine. "Oh, that's helpful" could mean you've just realized something, but "oh, that's helpful" might mean the opposite, that it's not helpful at all. The stress tells us what you really mean, especially when your words alone aren't enough. In everyday life, contrastive stress helps you correct people politely. If someone says, "Did you call Mark?" and you reply, "No, I called Matt," you're using stress to fix the name. Or when someone says, "So you didn't like the movie?" and you say, "I didn't say I didn't like it," the stress on "like" signals a very specific point. Maybe you didn't love it, but you also didn't hate it. Another good way to practice contrastive stress is by comparing options aloud. For example, "Do you want coffee or tea?" Your voice naturally rises on coffee and falls on tea. If you reverse it, "Do you want tea or coffee?" the emphasis shifts. You're training your ear and your mouth to highlight contrasts. This is especially useful when you're negotiating, persuading, or simply trying to be understood more. Clearly, even in storytelling, contrastive stress adds energy and clarity. Let's say you're telling someone about your weekend and you say, "I went to the beach on Sunday." If you stress beach, you're emphasizing where you went. But if someone thought you went to the mountains and you correct them, then "I went to the beach" now has a correcting tone. In another case, if the important detail is the day, maybe because you had to cancel other plans, then you'd say, "I went to the beach on Sunday." You're always guiding your listener with your voice, telling them what part matters most. This becomes especially helpful in business situations or presentations. Imagine you're presenting 3 options and you say, "The first option is the most cost-effective." That stress on first tells everyone to focus on that one. Or if you're correcting a common misunderstanding, you might say, "It's not mandatory, it's optional," clearly stressing the contrast between the two words. What's important here is that contrastive stress helps you speak with intention. So often, learners focus only on getting the words right, but communication is about guiding the listener to understand your purpose. With stress, you can lead your listener, even if your grammar isn't perfect. That's why I love this tool so much. It gives you power, even if your vocabulary is simple. If you want to get better at this, I recommend practicing with short dialogues. Take a conversation from a movie or a podcast and mark the stressed words. Then say the lines out loud, exaggerating the stress at first until it feels natural. Or read short paragraphs from books or articles and experiment with stressing different words. You'll be surprised how much the meaning changes. And here's one more tip. Record yourself. Just a simple voice memo on your phone. Choose one sentence and say it with different stress each time. Then listen back. You'll hear how your meaning shifts, even though your words stay the same. This kind of practice sharpens your awareness and helps you sound more confident and expressive. I've always been fascinated by how much emotion we can express with just our voice. You can say the exact same words and make someone feel comforted, excited, confused, or even hurt, all depending on your intonation. This is especially powerful in English, where tone carries an incredible amount of emotional weight. It's not just what you say, but how you say it. And when you start to understand how emotions ride on your intonation, everything about your spoken English changes. You start to sound more real, more human, more connected to the people you're talking to. Think about it. Have you ever said something like, "I'm fine," but didn't actually feel fine? Maybe you were upset but didn't want to talk about it. Now, imagine how that "I'm fine" sounded. Probably flat, maybe with a slightly lower pitch, a drop in energy, maybe even a pause before or after. Compare that to someone saying "I'm fine" with a bright, upbeat tone, quick pitch rise, lighter rhythm, a smile you can almost hear. The words are identical, but the feeling is completely different. That's the power of intonation, in emotional expression. Even simple phrases can take on layers of meaning. "Oh, really?" is a great example. If you use a rising tone, it can show genuine surprise or curiosity. "Oh, really?" But say it with a falling tone and a slightly slower pace, and suddenly it's sarcastic. "Oh, really?" The tone tells the truth behind the words. When people say English is full of hidden meanings or is difficult to read emotionally, this is often what they're noticing. The emotion is riding on the intonation, not just sitting in the vocabulary. 1. Of my students, a quiet young man named Kenji from Osaka once told me his coworkers always thought he was unhappy or uninterested at work. But he didn't feel that way at all. In fact, he was often quite happy, especially when finishing a big project. When we listened to his recorded voice together, it became clear. His intonation was too flat. Every sentence was delivered at the same pitch and pace. There was no emotional signal to his voice, so people filled in the blanks with their own assumptions, often wrong ones. We worked on shifting his tone, especially adding upward energy when expressing good news or excitement, and soft, slower tones when showing concern or empathy. The change was dramatic. He told me later that even his manager commented, saying, "You seem more engaged these days." But it wasn't that Kenji had changed who he was. He had just learned how to let his voice reflect what he really felt inside. Tone in English often moves in pitch waves. We go up and down in our voice like music. When you're angry, for I. Example, your pitch can get sharp or abrupt. When you're bored, it can become low and dragging. When you're nervous, it might get higher and tighter. And when you're excited, your voice tends to rise and move more quickly. Even the volume and speed you use are part of this emotional message. These aren't random. They're patterns you can learn and practice. Another great example is the phrase, "I don't know." Try it with different feelings. Say it quickly with a rising tone at the end. "I don't know." Now it sounds unsure, like you're asking for confirmation. Say it slowly, with a falling tone. "I don't know." That feels final, like there's no doubt about your lack of knowledge. Say it with a dramatic pause and a bit of a smirk. "I don't know." Now it's playful or sarcastic. Just one sentence, infinite meanings, all thanks to emotional intonation. This is something actors study deeply. Voice actors especially spend years learning how to say a single line in different emotional tones. They know the audience doesn't just listen to words, they feel them. And that feeling comes from how those words are delivered. As an English learner, you don't need to become an actor, but borrowing a little from their world can help you tremendously. Pay attention to emotional tone in movies, series, or even podcasts. Don't just listen to what's said. Listen to how it's said. I once worked with a woman named Alina from Warsaw who was a very expressive person in her native language. But in English, she said she felt muted. She felt like her feelings didn't come through even though she had the right words. That's such a common experience. Once we started listening together to different expressions and copying them, not just the words, but the exact pitch, rhythm, and feeling, things began to shift. She found her English voice, not just accurate, but alive. There's an exercise I like to use where we take one sentence and explore 5 emotions with it. Let's try, "I can't believe it." Say it like you're truly happy. Now try saying it like you're furious. Then with disappointment, then wonder, then sarcasm. Listen to how your pitch moves, where you pause, how your mouth shapes the words differently. That's the emotional engine of English. And when you practice like this, you're not just improving your pronunciation, you're becoming a better communicator. Sometimes I hear students say, "But I don't want to sound dramatic." I get that. Many cultures value a more neutral tone in everyday speech. But emotional tone in English isn't about being dramatic. It's about being clear. If you speak too flatly, people may not hear your kindness, your enthusiasm, your concern. They may misread you. Letting your intonation carry your real emotion is not acting, it's honesty. It's how people know you mean what you say. I also recommend recording yourself reading short emotional dialogues. Something like, "Oh no, what happened?" or "That's amazing news," or "You've got to be kidding me." Then compare it with a native speaker saying the same thing. Don't just mimic. Try to feel the same way they feel. Let your voice match that feeling. That connection between emotion and sound is what makes language come alive. One fun method I love is what I call the mirror emotion challenge. Look into a mirror and say simple phrases with different facial expressions: happy, tired, surprised, frustrated. Your face actually helps shape your voice. When you smile, your pitch naturally rises a little. When you frown, it often drops. Use that to your advantage. Your body and your emotions are connected to your voice. Use the full system. Emotional intonation is not just useful in conversations. It's essential in presentations, interviews, storytelling, and even small talk. Imagine telling a story in a flat tone. Even if it's interesting, your listener may tune out. But if your voice rises and falls with the tension, curiosity, or humor of the moment, suddenly they're with you, leaning in. They feel the story. When I listen to advanced English learners who still sound robotic, it's almost never about grammar. It's because their voice doesn't reflect their emotion. They've learned the structure, but not the music. And English, spoken English, is full of music. Intonation is the melody that carries your message, and emotion is the heartbeat underneath it. When they're aligned, your English becomes not only correct, but also deeply expressive and human. When I first heard Yuki's story, I smiled because it reminded me of so many students who discover progress in the most unexpected places. Yuki is a graphic designer from Osaka, a quiet and thoughtful woman with a deep love for storytelling, but through images. Her spoken English had always been good in terms of vocabulary and grammar, but she told me that people often didn't quite get what she was feeling. They understood her words, but not her intentions or emotions behind them. She felt like she was always holding back, even when she didn't mean to. Then one day, something changed. One of her friends invited her to join a local acting class. It was a small group that met once a week, and they performed simple scenes in English. Yuki wasn't planning to say yes at first. She had never acted before, and the idea of standing in front of others, speaking loudly and dramatically in a second language, felt a little ridiculous. But her friend insisted, and eventually, Yuki gave it a try. That decision ended up transforming the way she spoke English. On the first day of class, the teacher gave them a short script. Nothing complicated, just a basic dialogue between two characters at a coffee shop. The instructions were simple but strange to her. Don't just read the lines. Feel them. Say them like you mean them. Say them like someone who really wants that coffee. At first, Yuki felt awkward. She was used to focusing on accuracy, correct grammar, correct pronunciation. Now she had to focus on emotion, energy, and rhythm. It felt out of her comfort zone. But as the weeks went by, something clicked. The class practiced the same scenes multiple times, experimenting with tone, speed, and stress. They exaggerated. Their voices laughed at themselves, and even played scenes with silly voices just to feel how their mouths and voices changed. Yuki began to notice things she hadn't paid attention to before. How a rising intonation can show confusion. How a falling tone can signal finality. How slowing down just a little can make a message more powerful. She realized that drama was teaching her what grammar books never could: how to sound alive in English. One day, the group worked on a scene where one character was angry because their friend forgot their birthday. Yuki had to deliver the line, "You didn't even call me." Her first try was soft and flat, almost polite. The teacher stopped her and said, "No, you're hurt. You waited all day. Try it again, but this time, really feel it." Yuki took a deep breath and repeated the line, this time with tension, in her voice, her eyebrows drawn in, her voice dropping at the end of the sentence. The whole class responded with surprised smiles. It was a moment of breakthrough. She had used her voice to express something real, and it was in English. After that, Yuki became more confident. she noticed that her speech outside of class also changed. At work, when presenting a design idea to a client, she no longer sounded monotone. Her voice had energy, rise and fall, intention. She began using pauses for effect, stressing key words to make her meaning clearer. One of her coworkers told her, "I don't know what you've been doing, but you sound more natural these days." That was all the encouragement she needed to keep going. She also started watching movies differently. Instead of just reading the subtitles or listening for vocabulary, she focused on the actors' voices. She repeated their lines aloud, not just copying the words, but the tone, the emotion, the timing. Sometimes she'd pause the movie and try one line 10 different ways, exploring how a simple sentence like, "I can't believe it," could be excited, disappointed, sarcastic, or angry depending on how it was said. This was shadowing, but with a dramatic twist. One of her favorite exercises became something she called mirror monologues. She'd take a short piece of dialogue from a show and stand in front of her mirror, performing it like an actor. At first, she felt silly, but she realized that using her face, body, and voice together helped her internalize the rhythm of English. She wasn't just saying the words, she was communicating the whole message. It helped her discover her English voice, one that felt more like herself. We talked a lot about this shift. She said that in her mind, English had always been something external, something she had to get right. But through acting, it became internal. It wasn't just about correctness anymore. It was about expression, personality, nuance. She found joy in speaking English because it allowed her to play, to be creative, to connect emotionally with others. That made all the difference. I often encourage my students to try something similar. You don't have to join an acting class. Although if you can, it's a great experience. But you can do dramatic reading on your own. Take a short scene from a movie script or even a paragraph from a novel and perform it out loud. Focus on how it sounds, not just what it means. Try different emotions. Use gestures, facial expressions, breath. It may feel strange at first, but this kind of practice opens up parts of your voice that you didn't know existed. Another tip I've taken from Yuki's experience is the idea of rehearsing real-life conversations like mini performances. If you know you have to give a presentation or make a phone call in English, practice it like you would a scene. Say it out loud, explore different ways to sound friendly, confident, curious, or concerned. You'll find that when the real moment comes, your voice will know what to do. You've rehearsed not just the words, but the feeling. Yuki's story is such a wonderful reminder that learning a language isn't only about studying, it's also about experimenting. English isn't just a system of rules, it's a tool for human connection. And drama, acting, performance, all of these help us understand how to use that tool with more color and clarity. By stepping into someone else's shoes, even for a few minutes, you get to stretch your voice and imagination. And in the process, your English grows in ways you didn't expect. That's what happened with Yuki. She didn't just become a better speaker, she became a more expressive communicator. Her voice now reflects who she is, and it all started because she took a chance on something playful, something a little outside the usual language routine. So if you ever feel stuck or if you want to push your speaking to the next level, think about what helped her. Sometimes the best practice doesn't feel like study at all. It feels like play. And that's when real progress begins. Let me share something personal with you, something I've learned not only as a teacher but as someone who's passionate about human connection. When people ask me, "Julia, what's the one thing I should focus on to sound more natural in English?" I always say, intonation. It's not about knowing the most vocabulary or having a perfect accent. It's about the music of your voice, the rhythm and rise and fall that bring meaning to your words. It's what makes you sound alive, authentic, and present when you speak. And the good news is, this is something you can improve every single day with simple, intentional practice. I want to talk to you today not just as a guide, but as someone who's seen the transformation intonation brings. I've watched learners go from flat, mechanical speech to vibrant, confident voices, all by tuning into the melody of English. And you don't need complicated tools or expensive classes to start. You can begin with what you already have: your ears, your voice, and a little time each day. One of the most effective habits you can build is listening, really listening to English as it's spoken naturally. Choose something you enjoy. It could be a short podcast, a clip from a series, a YouTube interview, or a scene from a movie. Don't just listen for vocabulary. Listen for the shape of the voice. Notice when it rises in curiosity, when it falls, in certainty, when it slows down for emphasis or speeds up with excitement. Let yourself hear the emotion behind the words, the breath between the lines. After listening, try shadowing. This technique has changed the game for so many of my students. It's simple but powerful. Listen to a sentence or phrase and immediately repeat it, trying to match the speaker's intonation, rhythm, and even their pauses. At first, it might feel fast or awkward. That's okay. Start with short clips. Pause, rewind, repeat. The goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to feel the language in your body, to let your voice learn by doing. I like to recommend recording yourself during this process. Use your phone, any simple voice memo app. Choose a phrase you've practiced, record it, then play back the original version and compare. Don't focus too much on tiny differences in pronunciation. Focus on how the sentence feels. Are you using the same rise and fall? Do you sound curious where the original speaker does? Do you sound confident when making a statement? Listening to your own voice helps you become more aware and gives you a chance to adjust. Start small. You don't have to do an hour a day. Even 5 minutes in the morning or while you're making tea can make a difference over time. Pick one phrase a day and say it out loud with feeling. Say it 3 times. Once slowly, once naturally, and once with exaggeration. This helps you stretch your voice and build awareness. Think of it like warming up your muscles before a workout, only here, you're warming up your speaking muscles. Another daily practice I recommend is choosing a situation in your day where you'd normally speak in your native language, like ordering food, asking for help, or making a phone call, and mentally rehearsing it in English. Ask yourself, how would I say this if I wanted to sound kind, confident, friendly? Imagine the tone of voice you'd use. If you can, say it out loud. Practicing like this prepares you for real interactions, and when the time comes, you'll have already trained your voice to express not just your thoughts, but your emotions and intentions too. Let me ask you something. Has there ever been a time when you said something in English and the other person misunderstood you? Not because your grammar was wrong, but because your tone didn't match your meaning? Maybe you asked a question, but it sounded like a statement. Or maybe you were trying to be polite, but it came across as too direct. That's the power of intonation. It can change how your message is received. Sometimes just a small rise or fall in your voice can mean the difference between connection and confusion. One student of mine once shared that her job interviews in English never went well. She always prepared her answers, rehearsed her grammar, and tried to speak clearly. But she didn't realize her voice sounded flat, nervous but emotionless. After practicing with recordings and focusing on sounding more natural, not just more correct, she landed the job. Her words were the same, but her voice told a different story. That's what happens when intonation becomes part of your skill set. It's not just about speaking better, it's about being heard the way you intend. I often say, don't aim for perfection, aim for connection. That means speaking in a way that invites others in, that shows you care about being understood, not just about being right. Intonation helps you do that. It adds heart to your sentences, color to your thoughts, and depth to your meaning. As we wrap up today's session, I'd like to leave you with one small challenge. Think of one sentence you use often in your daily life. Maybe something like, "Can I help you?" Or, "I don't know." Now say it out loud 5 different ways. Once as a question, once as a confident statement, once as a joke, once with sadness, and once with excitement. This little exercise shows you how powerful intonation can be. You don't need more words. You just need more control of how you deliver them. You already have the tools. Your voice is ready. Your ears are ready. And you're not alone. We're learning together, step by step, one sentence at a time. Every day is a chance to grow, to explore new tones, to express yourself more clearly. You have the ability to make English not just a second language, but a real part of who you are. Let's keep growing together,